Okay, here we go. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Renee Thompson, a trailblazer in the world of healthcare culture. She's a nurse executive turned founder and CEO of the Healthy Workforce Institute, where she has become one of the most influential voices in addressing workplace bullying and incivility. I've seen her deliver impactful stories that transform toxic environments. She's worked with hospitals and health systems across the country to create culture where people and patients can thrive. So I'm so happy to dive into your journey today and just what's next for the movement toward healthier workplaces. And I'm just grateful to have you, Dr. Thompson.
Oh my goodness, Robin, thank you for having me, and please call me Renee. It's a shame that I have to spend all of my time and energy addressing bullying and incivility in healthcare. Like when you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. Like we're the caring industry. It's all about caring and being compassionate and saving lives, yet we can be so caring to our patients, but so cruel to each other. And they're lots of reasons for that, but always
Right.
happy to have a conversation about the work that we do and the strategies
Mm.
that we implement that work, especially people who are listening or watching this podcast. If they can take
Yes.
away like one thing that would make it easier for them to start addressing bullying and incivility, my happy place. So thank you for inviting me.
I love it so much. And again, I truly am grateful to have you on because it's such it's like the rotten apple. It's like the Snow White story. It's like, there's one bad apple in every bunch, at
Mhm.
least a one, but it can just kind of rot through organizations and environments. And I'm so lucky that you can share with others, maybe just a little tip off on what they can do and how they can manage this. So for us to get started, I'd love to know just kind of what inspired you to take on this mission.
Yeah, great question. So I've been a nurse now for about 32 years, and I've done everything you can do as a nurse. Of course, bedside, I worked as a home care nurse, worked for a managed care company. I was a nurse manager, I was an educator, and then I had a corporate job where I was responsible for professional development of about 10,000 nurses. And it was when I was in that role and I was talking to a lot of nurses, and I realized all they wanted to talk about was how badly they were being treated by the other nurses. And it reminded me of how badly I was treated, and not just as a bedside nurse, but even up through, an executive level. And it was a moment that I realized, oh my gosh, it didn't matter what organization I worked for or what role I had. I swear there was always someone who was trying to make my life difficult. And I thought, working in healthcare is hard enough without worrying about your coworkers making it harder. And I decided enough was enough. I mean, we've been talking about bullying and incivility for a century, but what are we doing about it? And so I quit a really great job to start this company with the intent to do something about it. And 14 years later, it went from me to now we're an institute, and there are 16 of us on my team, really working with leaders, physicians, executives, the entire team, because doing this work, I realize it's not just nurses, it's everyone. If you have humans working in your organization, you
Mhm.
got an issue. So yeah, that's what prompted me to start this work. I had seen my share of badness, decided I was going to do something about it.
Um, and you've said 14 years, so you've been doing this quite a long time. How have attitudes maybe shifted or, awareness shifted since you started, since you began this journey?
Well, it's it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
You have to add humor to this, okay? It's the only way
Okay.
that I can get through is
Humor works for me.
yes,
Yes.
add some humor. It's a very, difficult conversation and topic, but
Yeah.
there were times early on when an organization would bring me in, like a CNO or a CHRO would bring me into their organization to do a workshop, okay, or do a keynote at an event that they were having. And they
Mhm.
would tell me, please don't use the word bullying.
Um,
Don't say bully. And I just thought to myself, first of all, not everything is bullying.
Right.
And one of the reasons that bullying continues is because we're not clear on what it is and what it's not. Like we call everything bullying. Somebody will say, "Oh, I didn't get the schedule that I want. So whoever does the schedule is bullying me." And, you know,
Right.
maybe, but doubtful. And so it was just, they didn't want me to talk about bullying. They wanted me to kind of gloss over it and maybe just talk about the behaviors. Now, everybody knows bullying and incivility exists in healthcare.
Right. Mm.
Study after study after study shows it's like one of the top three issues that especially nurse leaders are dealing with today. And so now there's such a heightened awareness. I can say the word bullying when I'm out there now. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. No, but you're right. Just maybe making sure that everyone's on the same level on what is bullying exactly. So that was very helpful.
Yes.
You've worked with the challenges in workforce communications and dynamics for years.
Mhm.
What works? I mean, what patterns do you see in organizations that are really doing well with this, that are being successful in reducing toxicity?
So, good question. Not
Mm.
an easy question to answer. So I'll organize it in this way. Well, first of all, a lot of the
Right.
work that I've done over the years, it really just happened organically. So we have three, we call them buckets. So we do speaking, we do consulting, we have an online academy. And it was
Right.
really doing the consulting work where I go into an organization and I work hip
Mhm.
to hip with the leaders, the physicians, the entire team, and we completely transform their culture. You know, 4 phases, starting with heightened awareness. We develop a compact of professional behaviors with the entire team. And I'm telling you, Robin, it works. Our outcomes are phenomenal. And it's not just 1 year, it sustains. Okay. So as I was building this, because I created this really organically, I started to notice a pattern. So, organizations, and then I'll say specifically departments or service lines. We love to work with the service line, surgical services, maternal child health. You know, when you got like 3 departments,
Right.
that's our sweet spot. But we noticed that there was a pattern of things that when we implemented them, it worked. And that
Mhm.
is, so we have a framework, a culture change, you know, healthy workforce culture framework. And you have to strengthen your organization. You have to equip your
Mhm.
leaders and you have to empower your teams. So it's not a
Mhm.
one and done. You can't just bring somebody to your organization to do a workshop on bullying, check a checkbox and say, okay, no more bullying here. And it's not
Right.
just bullying, it's incivility. It's mostly incivility is what we're seeing. So strengthen organization. You have to make sure that in your onboarding process with all employees, that
Mhm.
you include content related to this is how we treat each other here at this organization. There needs to be education right from the beginning. When you bring people in, you have to
Right.
give them some, first of all, you have to let them know that it's important to your organization. Your culture is important. Doesn't matter how
Right.
clinically competent you are, it's how you treat people. But then you have to
Mhm.
provide them with the education to do that. You have to have robust policies and processes that make sense. They can't
Mhm.
be so complicated that nobody can follow them. Okay. We also take a look at building stronger relationships with HR, making sure HR is part of this, HR is in the room. And we have a lot of strategies under strengthen organizations, but
Right.
those are just a few. And then really the most important, Robin, is you need to equip your leaders. Those frontline leaders, the assistant nurse managers, your physician leaders with the skills, knowledge, and tools that they need to set behavioral expectations and hold people accountable. And that's initial training for leaders
Mhm.
and then ongoing. And then
Yeah.
finally, it can't just be the leaders or the executives sitting around the table saying, well, how are we going to address this? You have to involve the entire team. And when I say the entire team, I mean the physicians, the providers, you know, nurse practitioners, respiratory, support staff. It's everyone. And we do a lot with the entire team. So to sum that up, the
Right.
organizations who have been successful in addressing workplace bullying and incivility are the ones that include this in their strategic plan, that it's just as important as everything else, that they build in, they create, like they hardwire systems in place to address this. They equip their leaders and they involve their teams. Now, that's kind of big picture. And then we get into the nitty gritty. Like, what do I say to this person when they're acting this way? This is where we really provide all of the practical tips and tools and resources. And that's what they need. That's what they love. Because I'll share one
Right.
more thing and then I'll stop talking.
No, no, please. This is great.
I've had people tell me that their executive team would gather everybody together and say, all right, bullying and incivility are on the rise. It showed up in our surveys. We're losing people because of it. You need to go and address disruptive behaviors in your department. You need to start holding people accountable. Well, what does that mean? Like nobody's teaching them actually how to do
How to
that.
do that.
So that's the missing piece, and that's where my company lives. We are like we teach them actually how to do that and how to do that in a way that's easy. It's easy to do. They can start right now. So, yeah.
No, I love that. Yeah, and you can these even the words that you're using, like keeping people accountable, that that can be taken the wrong way as well. I mean, you have to give
Yes.
them the tools to make sure that they understand how to be accountable for the work that they do. So, oh, I love it, and I'm sure the conversation pieces that you give them and the communication training is amazing. Like to hear more about that. Um, everyone ask everyone they always assume there's an undertone or there's something passive going on, or people feel different currents and they're not quite sure if it's really bullying or not.
Mhm.
What are some of the most subtle or passive forms of bullying that you often encounter, and how can leaders begin to identify those?
Yeah, it's funny when we teach leaders how to start confronting disruptive behaviors. We always say start with overt. That's easy. You're
Mhm.
yelling. Okay, one of our strategies is name it. You're yelling.
Mhm.
You're criticizing. I just saw you roll your eyes at me. So just name the behavior. Well,
Right.
Robin, that's easy when it's overt. When
Mhm.
it's covert, not
Mhm.
so easy. So this is where we see things like people being nice to your face, but then they're mocking you behind your back, or they're looking to find fault in what
Mhm.
you're doing. And instead of just having a direct conversation with you about something, maybe you and I were working together and I
Mhm.
felt that you treated me in a disrespectful way, at a
Mhm.
meeting that we had. Like you interrupted me, you kind of, I felt like you threw me under the bus.
Mhm.
But I don't say anything to you. Instead, I find a way to get you back. So let's
Mhm.
say, simple example, I'm in charge of the schedule and you asked for a certain day off. I don't know that
Right.
I can give you that day off. I mean, it's when you think about it, it's high school, it's drama,
It
it's
is. Yeah.
cliques, but that passive aggressive, that covert, that's the hardest thing to address. When you said there's that current, there's that
Mhm.
things that are going on, like everybody,
Right.
you can sense it. You can sense it when you walk into a department and you see how people
Mhm.
interact with each other. Like you can see
Right.
the side-eyed looks, you can see the people who congregate together and the whispers. So
Mm.
I always say first when that's happening, just get
Right.
curious and pay attention because sometimes we're we're wrong. We're not accurate. We make assumptions about people that aren't true. And going back to the situation where we're at a meeting and I
Mhm.
felt that you were being disrespectful to me, instead I need to say to you, "Hey, Robin, do you have a couple of minutes? I want to talk to you about something." And then you
Right.
can say, at the meeting yesterday. Um, and I always say you can start by saying, I'm uncomfortable bringing this up and it might make you uncomfortable, but it's really important that we have this conversation because if the situation were reversed, I would want
Right.
you to tell
You to
me,
come to me.
yeah,
Right.
I really felt that you were disrespectful to me. And then you have to give specifics. You can't say, you disrespected me. Well, what does that
Mhm.
mean? You ask,
Right.
20 people what disrespect means, you'll get 20 different answers. You
Hmm.
interrupted me, you made a side comment about the quality, like whatever that is, and that's not okay with me. And so can we talk about it? And then let them kind of defend themselves. We're not doing that. And because we're not doing that, that's where passive aggressive covert behaviors grow. That it's people not talking directly to each other, but talking about each other, that creates like a groundswell of incivility. And what we try to do is the opposite. Talk to each other, not about each other. And that should be the default. And so, yeah, gosh, there are a ton of ways passive aggressive behaviors show up. But I just want you to think in terms of anytime you find yourself thinking, I feel like I'm in middle school again. That's usually incivility. It's usually, passive aggressive behaviors that are not overt. Anybody can address somebody whose overt behavior is disruptive, but it's all that other stuff that's not.
No, all good points. And I feel like, again, whatever course you're teaching, you need to share at the end of this because I
Okay.
think
Yeah,
I
I will.
think others are gonna, yeah, they're gonna want to know more. They're gonna hear more. Very helpful. Talk to each other instead of about each other should be something that everyone does. I appreciate that statement. Um, Moving on with more of this, if you're speaking with staff and you're really trying to help them to better themselves when they're
Mhm.
communicating with others, how can staff at all levels be empowered to kind of speak up without fear of retaliation? Because that word retaliation, it's still out there, right? Even when they maybe
Sure.
witness, maybe they don't experience, but maybe they witness incivility.
Yeah. Great question. So we teach um, people who are especially 2 o'clock in the morning, you're working with a group of people, your manager's not there, and somebody's being disruptive to you. That's actually why we came up with our like confronting techniques.
Mm,
Name it. I've already talked about that. The second one is speak it, honest and respectful. So that was me coming to you saying, Robin, not sure you're aware, but yesterday at the meeting, I found the way you treated me disrespectful. On it, can we talk
right,
about it? So that's honest and respectful, not,
right,
dishonest. No, everything's fine, Robin. No, we're good. We're good. And then speak
right.
venom about you. That's passive aggressive.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then we use a lot of scripts. So we love scripts, and scripts can help that bedside nurse 2 o'clock in the morning deal with someone who's being really disrespectful to them, who is treating them in a way that is condescending, intimidating, silent treatment, all of those things. So we have a lot of scripts, and you can get them all on our website. We have scripts for leaders and we have scripts for staff. And it might
Mhm.
just be if somebody's being rude to you, like I'm offended by that comment. And that's it. Or, I'm willing to, I love using the script, the STEM. I am willing to. So I am willing to
Mm,
listen to your feedback as long as you can give me that feedback in a respectful way.
I
Okay.
like
As
that.
long as
Hmm.
you're willing to speak to me calmly, because right now you're yelling at me. And
Hmm.
so I tell those nurses or anyone,
Yeah.
start small. Start with a few scripts, like think about the behaviors that you're dealing with. Start with
Right.
a few scripts and use them. There's another thing that we actually do with teams. We come up with sort of code words, like one of the code words, well, yeah, two words, chatter matters. Like if you overhear gossip, if you're the witness, you overhear gossip, or you overhear somebody
Mhm.
being critical or being very negative, chatter
Mhm.
matters. And that's,
Right.
but you have to agree to do that as a group. You can't just come up with
Mhm.
one code word and, okay, like
And then just lead with it.
using it. Okay. That has
Right.
to be something that you work together as a group. But I do want
Mhm.
to address your comment about retaliation. So
Mm.
you heard me speak did the keynote at AONL and
Yes,
talked
it's
about
great.
retaliation.
Hmm.
And it was from one of my nurses who, when I confronted her about her behavior, she
Right.
retaliated against me by calling off that week, knowing that
Right.
it was going to be very difficult for me.
Hmm.
I cannot prove it. And
Right.
that's the issue with retaliation. Sometimes
Mhm.
you can have the most beautifully written anti-retaliation policy, but if
Right.
somebody wants to retaliate against you, they will find a way. And so you can't just say, we have no retaliation here, please.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
now, if I'm a nurse, if I'm, whatever role, and I
Mhm.
am really struggling, there are
Mhm.
some things that you can do to minimize retaliation. It might just be that I'll start documenting. I'll start a documentation trail. I might not ever do anything with it, but studies show just the act of putting all of that on paper can be very cathartic for you and actually
Right.
empowering. Okay.
Mhm.
I might tell a trusted colleague. I might not tell my boss, but I might tell maybe my
Mhm.
preceptor or someone who's been there for a while, or who's great to have a conversation with? Sometimes the educators, because they don't
Right.
really report to anyone in your department
Mhm.
generally.
In the
So
health system.
in the
Right.
house, right, right, right. So find someone to talk to
Mhm.
about what you're dealing with and get some support, because there's nothing worse than coming into work, seeing who you have to work with, and then, having an anxiety attack knowing that you're going to have to work with somebody who treats you poorly.
Or feeling it and bottling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Renee, you may know that I've spoken a lot on well-being and
Hmm.
burnout. And
Yeah.
very easy way to burn out quickly is to bottle everything up and just work through it and without talking about it. I mean, so yeah, that's definitely a good recommendation. And then something you mentioned, just mm, ha- a good recall for me on speaking with one of the nurses that worked with me, and her response was, well, if I call it out or if I say something about it, then people think I'm being harsh, or they think that I am the instigator because I called it out. And that has to come up quite often for you as well.
So, sure, it comes up. I'm going
Yeah.
to tell you from the flip side.
Mhm.
Most people, though, like, they're concerned that they're coming off too harsh by, you're
Mhm.
yelling at me, you need to stop. I just saw you roll your eyes at me, or you rolled your eyes at Mary. Okay.
Right. Right.
Um, Believe it or not, though, the people who witness that,
Mhm.
hear you call it out, are secretly saying to themselves, finally, somebody had the guts to say
Yeah.
something.
Mhm.
So I think those of us who are people pleasers, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Right.
We avoid confrontation, which all humans do. We're designed that way.
Mhm.
Like, it's a psychological reality that we avoid pain.
Mhm.
Pain's an indication that our survival is at stake. While
Mhm.
confronting someone, especially a coworker, a peer who is nasty, confronting
Mhm.
them is painful, so we avoid
Mhm.
it. So if you push past that fear and you say something, um, other people are going to internally, if not externally, applaud. Now, there's a concept called radical candor, and that's from Kim Scott. Read the book; it's
Right.
excellent. Highly
I write
recommend
that
it.
down. Okay.
Kim Scott, Radical Candor, and radical candor. I can sum it up in this one sort of statement. Radical candor means I care enough about you to tell you the truth.
Love
Robin,
it.
there are people who have been behaving badly for decades. Nobody's actually told them the truth. So you asserting yourself, and just like
Mhm.
these non-threatening ways, you're yelling, you're cursing, you're whatever that
Right.
is telling the truth.
Mhm.
So I would worry less about being harsh by recognizing that more people will be applauding you. And, I work with most of the people I work with, they are healthcare leaders.
Mhm.
And I always say to them, it's better to be respected than liked. And you're respected when you speak up. when you
Mhm.
set those expectations and you start addressing these issues that everybody else is dealing with, but everybody's afraid to say something.
Afraid to say, right. Well, I hope that was really helpful for several of the nurses that I've worked with. I think that that statement really works. And
Yeah,
so thank you, especially for the Kim Scott. It's familiar, but I've never actually sat down to read the book, and I
good.
need to do that. Okay. Um, I'd love to know more about politically, like
Mhm.
policies, legislation, what's out there that's really aimed at protecting, healthcare workers from
Mhm.
toxic work environments.
So there's a lot out there
Okay.
when it comes to workplace physical violence, and I'll just say it like that because workplace violence is really an umbrella term. It is physical violence, patients and family abuse. We don't see a lot of coworker to coworker physical violence, but it's
Right.
also bullying and incivility. But we don't always recognize that it's under that umbrella of workplace violence. And I've been on the Joint Commission Task Force looking at workplace violence, and and I'm on several committees now, AONL, ANA,
Right.
bullying and incivility. People sometimes when they're focused on violence, they forget about the bullying and incivility. So what we're seeing out there in legislation is a lot about physical violence,
Mhm.
protecting healthcare workers from getting physically abused from patients and families. There's not a
Mhm.
lot out there about bullying, and rightly so. This is my expert
Excellent.
opinion.
Mhm.
Policies do not solve problems. People solve problems. You can have, like I said, the most beautifully written
Um, right.
anti-retaliation policy.
Mm.
I have read policies about bullying and incivility, beautifully articulated, but they still have a problem because you can't rely on a policy to address what's happening in a department. And even when
Mhm.
I've talked to leaders, what policies do you have? They don't know. So
Mm.
policies, legislation, all of that, that's a good thing to do, but it's not going to solve, it can't be the only thing that you do. And
Mm.
even bullying, we don't even have a legal definition for bullying in this country. We have a legal definition for harassment and discrimination, but not for bullying, because so many people don't understand what bullying is and what it's not. And so it's very complex.
It sounds it. Like
Oh,
you picked a very needed area in the industry to go into. Now,
yes.
the Healthy Workforce Institute focuses on training leaders, and you talked about that. I'm going to shift a bit and ask you about just kind of what's the onus on or role for nurse managers and frontline supervisors to really dismantle toxic culture.
Yeah. They are the center.
Mhm.
The culture in any department is determined by we'll just call them a frontline manager, that frontline leader.
Right.
They determine the culture. And in
Mhm.
order for them to cultivate a healthy culture, they need to have the knowledge, tools, skills to be able to address disruptive behaviors. And
Right.
we teach them this whole process of how to set behavioral expectations, hold people accountable, all of that. So they need to
Mhm.
be trained ongoing, can't be a one and done. And they need to be supported by their executive team and HR.
Right.
So one of the first things that we do when we get into an organization and we're consulting, we
Mhm.
establish an executive team, and we have a physician executive, a nurse executive, we have
Mhm.
HR. If it's a unionized organization, we have somebody from employee relations. We
Mhm.
get that team together because there's no way that manager is going to be successful if they're not supported by their executive team and HR. And that's where we find a lot of issues. So, like, we do our
Mhm.
part, we equip them, they have the tools, they're acting on them, they involve the whole team, the physicians are involved.
Right.
But if they're not supported by HR and their executive team, I
Not going
mean,
to be
they'll move the
successful. Yeah.
needle, but they won't be as successful as they could be.
That makes sense. And I know we're nearing the end. We have about two more questions. We'll see if we
Okay,
can get through those with
sure.
you. How do workplace culture and bullying really intersect with this ongoing challenge of nurse retention and mental health. What are your thoughts on that?
So funny you should ask that. I just did a webinar yesterday. So we host a webinar. Usually it's quarterly.
Okay.
We talked, my whole topic yesterday was from turnover to tenure, how to create a culture where nobody wants to leave. And
Mm,
there are a lot of studies out there right now showing the impact of culture on retention. And
hmm
it was interesting because one of the studies that I shared was that 94% of today's workforce say that when looking for a job, culture is more important than compensation, location, the workload itself, it's the culture. And so we know there's a direct correlation between culture, disruptive behaviors, whether they're being addressed or not,
Right.
intention
Right.
to leave, especially with our newest nurses. They will
hmm
leave if they, and especially, this during a nursing shortage. I don't have to put up with this. I'll go
Absolutely.
somewhere else.
Yep.
And they do. They go somewhere else. So how how can you be intentional about creating the culture that helps people to feel valued, appreciated, that they matter, that they're equipped, that they're supported? That's what we do, is create that culture so that people will stay. Because one of the managers that I actually talked about when we were at AONL, she started with, I think it was a 50% turnover. Now she has a waiting list of people who want to work in her department.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so it's
awesome.
possible, but you got to do all the things that I have been talking about.
Okay. I love that. Looking ahead for you, what's next? You have the Healthy Workforce Institute, and
Yeah.
it sounds like you're conquering all of these different things and you're really supporting so many different health systems. What's next on the horizon for you?
Retirement so I can spend time with my grandbabies, okay? No, not quite yet. I'm not quite
I
ready.
doubt they're going to let you retire now.
I know, like, no, no, no. Um,
Mhm.
Honestly, we launched a certification program 2 years ago as a
Okay.
pilot. So I can't, there's only one of me. Now I do have a team. However, there's only so much bandwidth that we have. And there's sometimes, like with our consulting, we have people on a waiting list because we just don't have the capacity. So I thought, why not teach other leaders who we've worked with already how to implement my system in their department so they can then continue to do this across their organization? And
Wow.
we did it. And now we have certified leaders. So they did the 2 year program. Now they're spreading this across their organization. So, Robin, that's going to be my legacy, is equipping other leaders with the skills and tools that they need to transform their organization, not just their department, but it's beyond their department. So that'll be my legacy. So we're actually looking at this was so successful that we want to launch another cohort in January. So we're actually, I was working on it this morning. Okay, working on some
Wow.
content. We're going to probably send out communication about that probably mid to end of summer to get that going. But yeah, you know what?
Where can they find that communication? Will it be on LinkedIn or on your website? Can you share
Well,
some more about that? Yeah.
yeah, so we have a lot of resources on our website. I would
Okay.
say 90% of our resources are free. Sure, I've written some books and we've got some
Mhm.
other products, but 90% are free. And all of our, like my keynote presentations are there, the workshops that we do, the consulting that we do, our certification program is there. So
Mhm.
so we have to update our certification page. That's one of the things I'm working on. But we always make an announcement to our community of leaders. So if you sign up
Okay.
for any of our free resources, you'll get on our list. And then, yes, LinkedIn is our happy place. We always post
Okay.
content on LinkedIn because we love connecting with other healthcare professionals. But yeah, and people can just reach out to me directly too. Renee at healthyworkforceinstitute.com.
Wonderful. Well, we certainly enjoyed speaking with you today. And we hope that you've been able to help just the listeners out there. Just, sometimes it's just hearing the information, knowing where to find the resources is really helpful. So, Dr. Renee Thompson with Healthy Workforce Institute, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Robin. I so appreciate you inviting me and all the work that you're doing too, because I know that you do amazing work and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to keep this advocacy going. I tell everyone at some point we will all be patients or we will all need health care. So we need to support healthcare workers graciously and be respectful and be kind and thankful for their time. And we're certainly just thankful for your time today. And we appreciate you. And hopefully we'll see you again. Her cohort for what's the class called?
It's just our Healthy Workforce Certification program.
Okay, wonderful. But that cohort application is coming available by the end of summer and it'll be starting in January. You can hear more about her there and you can find out more information at Healthy Workforce Institute. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Thompson. And to our listeners, we hope you'll join us next time on Clinician Voice.
Thank you, Dr. Robin.
Thank you.